At the end of last year, I embarked on my first ever landscape photography trip to Iceland. And if you haven't seen those videos, I'll link to a playlist below where you can watch those, after this one of course. But at the beginning of this year, I traveled to a new location in the Arctic. More on that in a future video. And to get there, I had to connect through Iceland. But rather than flying into Kirkjufell and right back out the next morning, I decided to extend my trip and spend the week prior in Iceland. And what is that right there? That's a new camera. A Horseman 6x9 medium format view camera, to be exact. So keep watching this video, as well as the next two videos, to see me try out this new camera and visit some new locations I've never been to. So in a number of ways, this is pretty much just a part two continuation of the end of the last Iceland trip. I'm back at the Kirkjufell. And I mentioned last time I wanted to shoot this on black and white film, and I am doing that now. I got a pretty overcast, moody sky, but I do have a little bit of a view of this ridgeline in the background. Just give me just a sliver of background interest, but I'm kind of hoping that it'll lift a little bit on the left-hand side of this composition to balance it out a little more. So I've taken one exposure, and I'm just kind of hanging out to see if the clouds will lift a little more for me. I'm shooting a roll of Acris 100 because I had one leftover roll from my film comparison video, and it was about to expire. So I decided to throw that in a bag and bring that with me on this trip, specifically for this purpose, hoping I was going to get a chance to shoot the Kirkjufell. It's a nearly monochromatic scene anyway, so I think it fits it really well. I don't know why I think it's just this moody black and white is kind of what I had pictured. And Acris is a pretty contrasty film, so I'm hoping that'll play to its strengths. So my settings are f16, 1/8 is what I have metered so far. There's a really nice strip of kind of medium toned gray painted on the bottom foundation of this church. It's really handy and easy to meter. But then I just checked my highlights to make sure that I wasn't blowing them out completely. And yeah, it should be just fine for black and white negative. Nice having a really moody sky, but I'm not getting rained on like I was last time. That's a bonus, because I was getting absolutely drenched last time. So I framed this with the 2x3, 6x9 Horseman VH here. Just kind of a central composition. It's pretty straightforward. There's actually a construction site behind this church, so I've actually centered the composition to try to hide that. I was trying to take more of a, kind of side profile. I just couldn't get all the distraction out of it. So I kind of got pinned in with a central composition here. So just a sliver of foreground here, which is just this yellowish green grass leading up into the church, and then just a ton of sky with all these clouds. And I'm kind of stuck with whatever I got for this ridge line here in the background. It's kind of hard to place that and all the other elements, so I just kind of let that lay where it did. But the main concern here is making sure I didn't get the very top of the church, the steeple here, cut off in the frame. I want to make sure that was in there. So I'm shooting this with my Rodin stock 65mm f4.5. It's a new lens to me, new lens and a new camera with the Horseman VH. That gives me pretty wide framing for this to make sure that I catch everything in frame that I want. And then it's just a matter about placing the tripod in the right spot to try to eliminate as many distractions as I can. I couldn't get rid of all of them because there's a couple lamps on this brick wall that borders the church. It's just this like spotlight that comes up when it's dark. I can't do much about it. It's in the composition, so I'll probably have to remove that later if it bothers me, that is. But the clouds started to clear a little bit on one of the peaks on this ridge line that's behind this church. So I went ahead and shot a second exposure. And that one was f16, 1/8. But yeah, awesome spot, cool shot. I don't know why, but I just adore this church, this black church in the middle of this rugged landscape full of lava flows and green highlights. It's just absolutely awesome. So hopefully it turns out in black and white film. But either way, let's take a look at the film and see what I got. The first frame turned out just fine, with just a slight hint of the ridgeline on the right-hand side, but the timing on the second frame was much better, as the clouds started to lift, and on the left-hand side you can make out a little bit more of the ridgeline. The second frame's also a stop darker, because I was becoming concerned about the amount of detail was captured in the sky. An interesting detail I learned from the information plaque. Originally, there was a much older church at Budir, which was built in 1703, but later demolished and rebuilt before the parish was finally abolished in 1816. One of those ladies of the parish petitioned the National Church to build a new one, but was rejected. Eventually, she received royal permission to build one anyway, and inscribed on the door ring is the text, "This church was built in 1848 without the support of the spiritual fathers." She's also buried in the churchyard. So I'm at the Kirkjufell, something like that. Kirkjufell, I'll put that on screen. It's a super awesome looking basalt rock formation that's got this almost near perfect circle in the center of it. It's just absolutely fascinating to look at. But it's got a ton of wave action. I think the tide's actually coming in right now. So the wave action's getting stronger and stronger. So I've been shooting lots of different things, trying several different things. Shooting with the Canon R5 right now on digital. Been trying a lot of different shutter speed settings, trying to dial it in and see what I like. Of course, it's changed as the wave action started to ramp up. But I've been using a combination of my circular polarizers and my ND filters. Everywhere from a 2-stop to a 6-stop to a 10-stop. So I tried a couple that were really long, like 30-second exposures, actually with a black and white profile too, to see if I like that as more of an abstract. And then I've taken some color shots at like a quarter of a second, you know. Quite a wide range of different shutter speeds I've been experimenting with here. We got this marine layer kind of sitting in right now where the sun's going down. It's kind of a bummer because just a bit ago the sun poked out and it lit the very top of this rock formation with some really nice glowing light. That looked really nice. So I fired off a whole series of exposures while that was going on. And now I'm just playing around with wave timing and stuff. I got my remote shutter release hooked up onto the camera so I can stash that in my pocket and keep my hands warm while I just trigger exposures. It's a little easier to try to time it that way than, you know, trying to get it with a 2-second timer with the shutter button. So I figured I'd shoot this on digital first and kind of scout it out and decide if I want to go get the film camera. I got half a mind to come shoot this on black and white negative film. But I may have to wait until maybe tomorrow morning. We'll see. I'm starting to run out of daylight. But I'm staying around here for the night, so I have more than one opportunity to shoot this. So that's good. But anyway, here's those shots.
I did return the next morning with the Horseman 6x9. The tide was further out, and as a result, my initial reaction was one of slight disappointment, so I didn't record anything to video. I couldn't stick around waiting for the tide though, so I decided to set up and expose the rest of the roll of Acris anyway. I used my Roden stock 65mm f4.5 lens, and I exposed multiple frames, trying to get the timing of the waves right, which is something that's hard to verify when you don't have an LCD. Looking back at the images now, I think they turned out just fine. The sky has plenty of clouds and drama, and I even like the added detail of the people standing on the cliff edge in the background. It's a really small detail, but it gives it a sense of scale. I would have preferred just a little more action in the foreground, which is something the high tide could have provided, but even without it, I'm still happy I took the shots.
Well, it's a cold and blustery morning. Wind is very, very cold. I think it was about -6 Celsius when I drove in. So pretty cold, well below freezing. But I'm at Kirkjufell right now, which is kind of a very iconic location for its very recognizable mountain shape. I've been taking some time this morning to kind of shoot, you know, the really well-known compositions. It's kind of one stretch of trail that you walk along, some falls that are in the foreground of this. It's a really, really well shot location. And when I come to these kind of honeypot locations, you know, I'll start and I'll shoot those compositions if I have time, unless I see something else. But I did go ahead and shoot, you know, the main shots that everyone goes here to shoot, you know. But now I'm kind of exploring, because what I find is usually on these sorts of locations is you have this kind of main thing everyone comes for, but if you kind of open up and just walk around, you know, and observe the area, you'll find something that no one else is shooting, you know. everyone kind of seems to zero in on that one thing, but if you take your time, you can often find, some more original kind of stuff around too. So that's kind of what I'm working on right now. And since it was so cold last night, it actually created a lot of ice. So the falls over there had a bunch of hanging chandeliers, and the kind of coastline around these little, I don't know what you call them, fjords or whatever they are. But it's pushed up a bunch of ice on the banks. I really like that. I really just wish the mountain had some snow on it too, because I would really sell this photograph. But I got to make do with what I got. I was a little surprised to see, unfortunately, I think I had more snow at home in Utah than Iceland does. But we're making do. So what I'm shooting here with the Canon R5 right now, doing this on digital because, well, it's easier to experiment and get more creative with the digital than it is on the film camera. But what I've got is a frozen shoreline here with a bunch of ice, and then it's ice up in the midground, and then it points up into this mountain. But more than that, I've got a couple spots here where some boulders up on the shoreline here are poking through the ice. So as the ice sheet's kind of been pushed up by the tide, it's created these spots where the ice is cracked and left this little open, kind of split looking thing. And I got a grouping of about 3 of them in the foreground here. Then I got frozen midground and then the mountain. So that's what I'm working on. I'm shooting with my 14mm prime lens. It's a real wide view. It's got a little bit of distortion to it too, but it doesn't really seem so prevalent in this. This thing's just fine. It's actually working to my favor, that is. I'm shooting a vertical comp. And normally when you shoot with a super wide lens like this, whatever it is that you got in the background here is going to look really small in the frame. So what I've done is I've taken my camera and I've tilted it so that mountain peak is more towards the top of the frame. And that kind of pushes it towards the distortion of the lens, which makes it just appear as big as it actually is, instead of making it look really small and minimal if it's down in the middle of your framing. But then in addition to that, I've gotten really low on the ground here and gotten really close to my subject here to try to fill the frame with the foreground too. Give me a kind of low down perspective. But even still, it's a little wider than I need in the foreground, so I'm going to end up cropping the bottom off a little bit because there's more foreground than what I need. But I'm actually still taking exposures. I've been waiting for the light to get better, and it's finally starting to. I'm taking a series of photos here in a focus deck because when I'm this close to a subject and then have a target in the background, of course, I'm going to have some focus issues. So I'm stacking probably around 6 to 8 frames here. That's what it's looking like. There's been a lot of active clouds in the sky this morning, so it's kind of been a case of just trying to wait it out to where I get the right amount of dappled light on the background and the foreground and everything all combined here. Every once in a while I get a break in the clouds to where it, throws some dappled light up on the mountain and it looks really good. So that's what I'm kind of hanging out here hoping to get. Annoyingly, there is a front end loader in my frame here, although with the wide angle lens he's pretty small, so I'll have to clone him out in post, get rid of it. So now I'm getting some dappled light on the mountain finally, so I'm going to finish up these exposures, and when I get home I'll stack them all together, and here's what that looks like.
Thanks for watching, and if you enjoyed the video, you can let me know by hitting that thumbs up button down below. And maybe while you're down there, consider hitting that subscribe button so you don't miss the next couple videos. Thanks again, take care, I'll catch you in the next video.